today. First, we have Jane Burke, and Jane is the Senior Vice President, Strategic Initiatives, ProQuest Information and Learning. Ms. Burke is a well-known and respected leader in the information solutions industry. Prior to joining ProQuest, she co-founded and served as President, CEO of Endeavor Information Systems until its sale to Reed Elsevier. Under her direction, the information retrieval company grew to become a $2.8 million company with a reputation for being customer-centric. In addition to working as a librarian at Cook Memorial Library in Libertyville, Illinois, early in her career, Ms. Burke served as president of Notice Systems and most recently was a director of new business development for Cadmus Professional Communications, a $450 million publisher services company. Ms. Burke earned master's degrees in library science from Dominical University, formerly Rosary College, and in management from the Kellogg School of Northwestern University. Always an involved member of the library community, she now serves on the Board of Governors for the Northwestern University Library and on the Board of Directors for the Dominican University Graduate School of Library and Information Science. Among her many awards, Ms. Burke was inducted into the Chicago Area Entrepreneurship Hall of Fame. Her co-presenter is Jim Ulsh, and Jim is a Director of Market Development at ProQuest, focused on the development of new products and services. Jim came to ProQuest as part of an acquisition in 2003 and has developed several award-winning web-based research products. Prior to joining ProQuest, Jim led product development efforts at Infonautics and BigChalk.com. Before entering the information services industry, Jim spent 12 years in the hazardous waste industry, and Jim graduated from Moravian College with a bachelor's degree in chemistry. So it's my pleasure to welcome our duo today and take it away.
Thanks so much. Jim and I are very, very pleased to be here. What we're going to talk with you about is a research project that we have been working on for, I think honestly, the last 2 years, really, with a lot of intensity in the last 9 months. Several of the people in the audience have actually been included in that project. And it's all about making, I'm on, or should be. It's all about making video discoverable. I thought that our keynote speaker yesterday, Mr. Walker, was really right on when he talked. He sort of, slipped in all of his sustainability. He slipped in this statement as he was talking about the impact of Coursera, and he talked about how institutions are going to be producers of content, and that content that is going to be produced is going to be video-based. There's just no doubt about that. But how is it that people can discover that it's there? How is it that people can discover segments of it for reuse? How is it that the historical video content produced on campuses, whether it's performances that were given where you have performance rights or other things, how can all of those things be made available not only more on your own campus, but really across all of academia? So that's a question that has been posed at ProQuest and that Jim and I have been working on what we hope will be a practical solution for that. ProQuest is a privately held company, about $650 million, headquartered in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And our owner, Bob Snyder, he's a terrific, terrific guy. And a few years ago, he was kind of doing a tour of places, thinking about video and video systems. And he came home and he said, the libraries really need help. It was just kind of his whole focus was the libraries have to play a part of this. The libraries want to work with their media centers on campus, but they really need help. So what was it that ProQuest could do? Now, when you look at ProQuest's offerings, we're very involved in the academic community. Our academic division is by far and away the largest division inside ProQuest. And we have offerings such as RefWorks, which is a bibliographic citation manager. I'm sure many of you have that installed, campus-wide. Our Bowker division has made books in print for, literally decades. They are the ISBN agency for North America, so we're tremendously involved in that kind of publishing. Serial Solutions, which is our software division, makes a discoverability tool for libraries called Summon. You know, we're just very involved in a lot of aspects of what goes on around information on the campus, but it's just very clear to us that video is going to be a third, if not greater, of the kind of content that you consume and that you produce on campus. And what is it that it would make sense for ProQuest to be involved? So when you look at the list of questions, they're fairly large. We started out with a charge that was, Jim and I started out with a charge that was like, okay, what does it make sense to do? What does it make sense to think about? What place should ProQuest think about developing something here? We know that video is very, very involved in scholarship today. And really, if you look at distance learning, it's all video-based, and more of classroom is video-based. What is happening with all of this content being produced on campuses, and more that's happening. You're doing lecture capture. People are producing other kinds of video. What's happening with it? How findable is it, if at all? How chunkable is it, if at all? What's the library's role in this? You know, the library has historically been the place where campus resources as well as commercial resources got described so that they were findable. As your campus worked on an institutional repository a few years ago, when it became time to describe that stuff, the library got very involved. And yet libraries so far have not really been given kind of a central role around the video assets. So what was needed in order to make that possible? When we started our research, one of the things we did was we had a focus group in February of 2011. And I don't know if you remember the first part of February 2011, but the weather across the continent was awful. I myself was trapped in Dallas in a snowstorm for like 3 days, and nobody could kind of get anywhere. But we invited, I think it was a total of 13 people to a focus group in New York. Miraculously, everybody made it, including people like Deg, who came from Arizona. You know, it was really, really far away. And we started to talk about those big questions, and all sorts of ideas bubbled up. It was like, what do libraries need to take on a role and to help the overall campus with all of this video stuff? Well, kind of anything and everything. Lots and lots and lots of issues came up around commercial titles, around locally produced video, around video collections, which were emerging from Films on Demand and Alexander Street Press and a few others, you know, kind of everything. So after that, we decided that we would focus our research and our efforts and the possibility of creating a new service around institutionally produced video. Now, why did we make this kind of a decision? First of all, because we felt that there was an increasing amount of video being produced on the campuses, particularly, as I said, around lecture capture, and it was kind of stacking up. I think it is kind of stacking up. It's not described, it's not transcribed. You know, there's not much that you actually know about it. If you were to try to find a particular aspect of that, it would probably be very, very hard. We also thought through how this would fit with what's going on in overall scholarship on your campuses. One of the things about ProQuest, and the place where ProQuest started its life, is as the dissertations publisher for North America. If you have a PhD, we published it for you. And we have it. We have every dissertation that's ever been submitted to us in the vault. We still get more than 50,000 a year in print on the loading dock. We've asked for you know, digital submission, but people like to send us the Word, you know, typewritten documents. But of course, more and more of those come with video components. And that's one of the things that has really increased our awareness, is that there's all of this video being produced as a part of true scholarship, not just lecture capture, not just historical, not all these things, but all taken together. You know, it's a huge amount of institutionally produced stuff. Not quite yet.
Sorry.
So when we thought about what it's going to take to make that video available, from that cloud of stuff on the last slide to this one, this is kind of our roadmap. We discovered that the first thing that had to happen for a lot of this video to be practical is it had to be converted. People said, well, we want to convert the 1977 championship basketball game. We want to convert the ballet. We want to convert all of these kinds of things. And that had to be a part of the service. In order to make it available, we had to make it digital. Transcription. Huge amount of our work, and Jim is going to describe that to you, has gone on around transcription of this video, and Jim will tell you why that's so important to us. Metadata. The libraries, if the libraries are going to help make the stuff findable on campus, they need metadata for it. And one of the things that we know from a variety of surveys is that's not going very well in libraries. That particularly around institutionally produced unique resources, video, libraries are just not having the staff or the time to be able to kind of describe that. And so metadata around that, which could yield cataloging data, really not there. Streaming, the whole issue about how to make it streamable. If it's unique content, you know, this is not something where you can go to Alexander Street Press and buy a streaming license. How do we make it all available to you? And the whole issue about segments, and finally the whole issue about getting it included in discovery systems that are being increasingly installed by academic libraries. Because, you know, academic libraries buy lots of books, lots of journals, lots of articles, lots of objects, and they're more and more installing single search, Google-like Discover services. Submitting the video to that is really important. So from that, we did some survey work. And out of the survey work, and I'm going to show you a little bit of it, we got a better handle on the problem overall. But nothing surprising. You know, volume and complexity. Users expect to find it. I'm a librarian, and one of the hardest things for me to convince my fellow librarians is today's student doesn't think about format. You know, for them, it's all digital, and it's all video. I think pretty soon they're going to want us, you know, to make sure that the journal articles on paper kind of have a video-like feel about them. And yet, libraries, of course, have been very focused on format by format, and users are not. So the video is often siloed. We know from research that it's very under-cataloged and very under-indexed, unless it's the kind of commercial stuff. And even there, what we heard from our librarians in the focus group was, even that cataloging is not very good, not readily accessible, and the issues about rights management and use concerns, even about institutionally produced video. And we know that, you know, we know that that professor may be glad to have somebody convert and describe the lecture, but are they really willing to say that it's open access? Are they willing to have it published under a Creative Commons license? Not clear. So then we started talking to the librarians. We hired a professional research group 3 different times to do surveys for us in the past year. And the first part of the survey that came back from libraries was, what do you feel describes the status of cataloging and metadata on your campus about your on-campus video? And the answer between the gold and the blue is not very good. Then we also asked, are they doing anything about it? In the sense of sending any of it out, or in the sense of looking for someone to provide that kind of cataloging and metadata? And the answer was no. So there's this huge volume of institutionally produced video that they say is not very, very well described, but don't necessarily see an alternative, don't necessarily see a service that could make it better. And then we asked whether these libraries wanted a role on the campus in making all of this existing and what will emerge as video content, whether the libraries themselves wanted a role in this. Because one of the things we were concerned about is maybe they don't. Maybe this is a problem that, libraries don't want to deal with. We don't think that's the case, and we were glad to find out that that wasn't the case. Because actually, if you look at the gold and the blue again, you have very, very strong emphasis that the library wants to be very involved. Then we also surveyed the ed tech people. We're a little less informed about this at ProQuest because the libraries are usually our customers. But what we found is that the ed tech people don't know the word metadata, but know that they need it. And the need without a name is actually what came back from our research firm. They said, yes, metadata for this stuff to the ed tech people is a need without a name. And that they really felt huge amounts that centralized indexing and really good discoverability of this stuff would be very important. Why is that? Because they're the ones that are looking at this increasing stack of content. They're the ones that are seeing how much they're capturing everywhere. Okay. And from all of that, we find and continue to find that there is this lovely area of opportunity for ProQuest to meet some, not all, but some of the institutional discovery needs for the video content. And so that's what Jim's going to show you as we have worked now since February of this year, because in February of this year, we had a meeting with pilot partner institutions, which we had recruited about a year ago, and got them all together, and then since then have really been working very hard on actually trying to make this a reality, but not without some bumps. So Jim's going to tell you about that.
So the hypothesis, geez, that's a little loud. How about that? Sorry about that. I'm a little loud to begin with. Yeah, I'm fine.
Well, you got everybody's attention,
Yeah.
Jim.
So the people from the pool are coming now? So our hypothesis was to take and create automated transcripts from this video content. Now, the old Don Rumsfeld thing, there were things that we knew, we didn't know, and then there were things that we didn't know. There were certainly those. We knew the transcription wouldn't be perfect, but we knew from our past experience that you could actually generate very good metadata from things that were less than perfect transcripts. Things that we knew we didn't know were we didn't know how good the transcription would be. Would it generate enough of a transcript that you could work from? Things that we didn't know that we found out were things like the quality, what would affect the quality of the video, or the quality of the transcription, and some of the transcription idiosyncrasies. The reason that we were striving so hard to do this in an automated fashion was we know this has got to be affordable. And if you had to hand transcribe everything and hand index everything, you just wouldn't, or you've already done it. So we knew that was the burden, and that's what we really wanted to work on in the automated process. One of the things that Jane had alluded to, our first pass was, okay, we'll just take everybody's digital files and process them, and then it was, well, we don't have this stuff digitally. So there's this whole stream of services that go along with this that we kind of ended up calling the bus route, and we assumed that people would get on in certain spots and get off. Nobody, some people might stay on for the whole thing, but that's what we wanted to investigate, each of these components, to see, where our competencies were that we could apply to these, and where we could add value to the things that we didn't necessarily do on our own. So, there's a lot of hubris in saying that you can do this from the transcription, but we do have a lot of experience that Jane alluded to. Here's a couple examples products. I won't go through them all, but we digitized the New York Times from microfilm and some other sources. And that was a process where we did automated, we did OCR, 3-tiered OCR, but we also hand transcribed the first paragraph of every article in the New York Times, because the way newspaper articles are written, that turned out to be a really good thing to do. So there's a case where we did the hand transcription too. The Vogue was a really neat one that we just did, is we digitized the entire run of Vogue, and we indexed them and made navigation to a lot of things that were very different that hadn't been done before. So for instance, we have all the pictures, the types of dresses that are in there, so somebody can look for certain types of shoes and find them through the whole thing. The images are indexed differently. The text is all indexed. So it's experience that we have, and also dealing with the transcription vendors. And we did the New York Times. I think we probably scarfed up 90% of the world's transcription and copying services. The other part was the discoverability, and as Jane mentioned, through our summon services, which is the single search interface, we've had the experience with the discovery. And one of the things we've processed billions of records from all these thousands of sources. There was such a small amount of video in there that we know that people aren't putting. I think we're starting to see some of the things from Films Media Group and Alexander Street that they're providing metadata that can be put in these things, but that's a very small amount that's in there. And just this graph to show that when the material is in the discovery service, the usage increases dramatically. So there's a real ROI on having your content discoverable for the population. So as Jane said, we put together a group of partners for the pilot list. Some were conscripted, volunteered here last year. We got a couple people from CCUMC. And this was a great group to work with. They all had very, very different content. And they've been really good partners throughout the whole test here. We also had to test out some partners on the digitization and the transcription side. We used Crawford for our digitization. I don't know if you guys used them at all. They're down in Atlanta. They turned out to be a really good partner. They're great. And Ramp is who we picked for our transcription. And we had a previous relationship with Ramp for some of our Bowker things. So we utilized them for that. And they also provided some metadata. Here's the flow. This is very, very busy. But I think one of the things I want to point out is we got physical assets and digital assets from all the partners. And there were 22 formats from the physical assets from 78 shellac albums. We had a couple very unique tape categories that Crawford hadn't seen before. Lots of 16 millimeter, lots of 8 millimeter, pneumatics, the whole gamut. And then there were 8 different file formats from electronic. So we asked for a good mix, and boy, did we get it. So what we did is we'd get the files in. We sent the hard copy or the physical assets to Crawford. They processed them, sent them to us, and then we put those along with electronic files and ran them through the Ramp transcription process. Then we developed our metadata from that, sent that back, or we're in the process of sending that back to the partners, and then we also had it ready for the player. One of the big things was to test 3 metadata programs. And these are the 3 that we used. One was from Ramp. And Ramp, their business is doing transcripts for commercial broadcast and for call centers and things like that. So they have certain things that they're looking for in the metadata. Bowker is, that metadata was built our analysis was built mainly for books. So there's certain things that they're looking for when they're going through the books. And then the ProQuest, that's what we use for doing all the scientific and scholarly journal articles. So we wanted to compare all three of those individually to see, and we figured there was some nugget there either in certain ones or some would do better with others, or some combination thereof. So the findings, and we'll watch these. So, you know, we knew the transcription wasn't going to work perfectly, but I want to give you a couple examples of where it, see if you can tell why it didn't work. Get ready for the volume on this one. I'm going to have to play. That sounds okay. So you're not going to get much of a transcript out of it. You can barely. Okay, but I'll let it go a little because this one's interesting. You see the host.
Okay, now you can look again, and Earl, you can go ahead and point for
Host has a cigarette while he's doing the show. Okay, so that was one case. Here's another one that we didn't foresee, that we ran into. See if we can figure out why this didn't work.
メリーランド大学カレッジパーク校は首都ワシントン DC の近郊にあり、優れた研究機関として世界的に有名です。
That one's not going to work.
工学、経営学、
But it's funny to see the words that it did try and come up
国
with
際
from
関
the
係論
Japanese.
の各学科が高い
You
評
can see
価を
the
受けています
transcript。rolling there. That's as close
メ
as
リ
it
ーラン
could
ド大
get.
学では未来を目指す学問だけで
So
なく、
that's a case where it
過去
didn't
に
work.
遡る歴史の研究にも
Nice turtle. And then here's one more that didn't work. See if you figure out why this one didn't work. Come on. Silent. So there were three cases that we didn't even think about. Okay, they're not going to get much of a transcript off a silent film. But when it did work,
So executives make decisions for all sorts of reasons. Shareholder value is certainly on the top of the list, but they're people. They are humans, and as a result, they have the same brains that everyone else has, more or less, which means that we are driven by emotional influences, and as a result, sometimes we might, and they might, do things that maybe are not necessarily the right thing to do, certainly not consistent with shareholder value. There's lots of examples of that, both in corporate America and financial services, and actually in everyday life as well. For example, if you take Dick Fuld at Lehman Brothers and you look at what Dick did as the CEO for a long period of time, and how really he was at the helm when the company that was 200 years old went bankrupt. And
I'll stop that for a second. But I want to show you on the side here. This is the automated metadata that came out of that. So that's pretty nice for no human intervention. Now, that transcript wasn't perfect. There were cases, there were, grammatical errors, there were sentences that were cut off, or, that were things that started in the wrong place. But, that's a pretty nice record for an automated process. That's what it came up with. The subjects were from the ProQuest, they're the Modified Library of Congress, classification codes, company names, people, and keywords. But that's an aggregation of the 3 metadata systems. So when you get a good transcript, it was really impressive what it could do.
So, one of the very basic things for us was programmatic transcript rather than manual transcription because of cost. If you're going to have lots of this, which you are, and we have an opportunity to help you with lots of it, which we'd like to do, it has to be cheap enough. And so, one of the things that we haven't had the luxury of being able to do is just throw up our hands and say, oh, we'll go to the manual transcription vendors. Those costs are 10 to 15 times the cost of programmatic transcription. So, that's kind of a cornerstone, and as Jim says, when the transcript is good, the metadata that we can generate programmatically is also good, especially by putting it through multiple processes.
So here's kind of the general rule that we came up with based on looking at these. If the transcript was less than 50% accurate, you didn't get much. I should say, I'll go to the quality of the transcripts. If you looked at all the content that we got through the 400 plus files, 50% of the transcripts were less than 50% accuracy. Now that includes the silent. We had an awful lot of silent ones. There was a big block of student-filmed conference proceedings. So those were really bad audio. So that's what that came up with. About 20% were in that 50 to 75 range, and 30% were 75 or over. If you looked at the metadata that you got from those transcripts, less than 50%, the metadata is really spotty. It would come up with inappropriate things. It would miss lots of things. Sorry. Okay. But what was surprising was in that 50 to 75% range, you still got some very useful metadata. And the interesting thing was even though you wouldn't want to ever use that transcript, at least you knew something about that video that you didn't know before. And I think that was really neat for us to find. And then 75% accuracy on the transcript, you started to get really good metadata.
Can you go back to the really good example?
Yep.
So, if you're thinking about what people are going to want to find when they're looking, for this kind of video, it's not simply that you can assign 2 big broad subject headings to it and have enough. That's why we're digging into this so much. You want the people. You want the people who are mentioned. You want the countries who are mentioned. You want the institutions who are mentioned. In a 90-minute course capture, someday somebody might want to find the 4 minutes where a story is told about an individual or a historical happening. And so to say metadata around scholarly video means to us as deep as we can get, but in order for you to be able to get that service from us, it also, again, has to be very affordable. So that's kind of why we're looking at all of this stuff.
So what do we find? The automated transcription needs some more work. We think there's avenues to using multiple versions, do a couple passes, do some triangulation, look at some other systems. One of the things that the pilots pointed out that was really interesting is there's a current bias on term recognition. And think about it, it kind of makes sense because what RAMP was doing was current broadcast. So for instance, if they were iffy on the strength of a word and it was kind of like Facebook, it would get assigned Facebook. So you'd have things like people from the 60s mentioning Facebook, because that's what the transcription process, it was trying to find something that could, and there's Obama references from the 50s, and it's just that this thing was trying to think, in terms of current production. So we need to look at that, a couple of those things. The holy grail of having the nice, clean captioning coming out of this is still really important to us. So we're going to take a look at ways to make that better, because one of the things with this transcription was there were sentence breaks that were kind of, if you looked at it, it was kind of odd that it really wasn't a sentence break, but the transcription put it in, or it ran something longer, or there were other grammatical things like that that would make it tough to read. But I think there's going to be a point where there's two or three tiers of the transcription that goes on, from the programmatic maybe up to the manual for things that are really valuable that you want to get all that for. Metadata development, we're really pleased with the way those three things combined and triangulated. So some tweak in there, but that really worked out well. One thing we did find is, because we're using authority files that are more global, there was lots of local things that would be missed. So for instance, you'd probably want to have a file of your building names, if it was talking about campus, that we wouldn't know, that wouldn't be in that, or, local politicians, or if there was somebody. So, I think one of the things we think about is having a local authority file that we tack on, and maybe even, as that becomes a larger corpus for the whole group. We know there's going to be manual data entry needed. I mean, there were things like, titles. The transcription's not going to pick up the date or the people who produced it. So there's going to need to be some mechanism for manual entry of data. One of the things that kind of surprised us was the value of the time coding. We got that. It was just a part of it, but to see some of the things that we could do with that were really neat. The navigation, the highlighting, the indications, and a lot of things that users are used to now from the commercial video sites. So that you could make a clip. You could say a stop and end, and put something there, or navigate to a certain part, or search within, things like that. We did have a couple process issues that we came up with. We tried to make things as simple as possible. We probably made them too simple. So one of the things the pilots pointed out was, hey, you can ask us for more data. We just may not have it, but if we have it, we'll enter it. So I think that was a good learning thing for us. Multiple labels needed. One of the things we discovered, and you guys probably know this, is when you have a can, a film, or a box of tape, what's in there may not be what's on the label. And that was a pretty common occurrence. And another piece was we really wanted to be agnostic about the file formats, and I think you still need to be, but it requires more work on the back end to get them to run through the certain processes. Next steps for us, tuning the transcription. We'll look at a couple different filters. We'll look at a couple different services. I think there's a triangulation there that'll work. One of the things that we do want to figure out is to recognize non-English and music, so that gets identified, because we think that's an important piece of metadata that somebody will want. We can look at segmenting options. Do you do it on the change of speakers? Do we need to identify the change of speakers? Another piece would be metadata at the segment level. Some of these longer videos could get pretty big, and maybe we want to go to while you have the ability for a keyword to go to a certain spot in the video, maybe the subject matter of a certain spot would be more important too. So that's another segmenting option we'll have to look at. And we definitely heard loud and clear that you're going to need editorial access for things like rights management, corrections, access control, and more metadata entry.
We feel that doesn't mean that we shouldn't make that a part of the service, because there'll be times when you do need it. There will be times when, at the very end, you don't want anyone else to host the content for you because you've had your own streaming service. But that may not always be the case. It may not be the case for you forever, and it may not be the case for any particular institution. So as we look at the entire route, we are going to keep working on all of the stops on the route. We're taking a pause right at the moment at the transcription stop. You know, there's guys with put combs out, and we're kind of working through that. But the reason, of course, that we're putting all that time and energy into it is that transcription is sort of the source of everything else that we can do programmatically. You know, it's good transcription that gives you the metadata, gives you the captioning, gives you the segmenting. So, you know, we have to, what we've learned is we have to kind of keep working with it. I will tell you, though, that for me, as somebody who doesn't know very much about this technology, I was amazed at what we can do right out of the box. It's not good enough, but boy, it's really amazing. And it really does give you hope that you can kind of calm a service provider around all of these things. The other thing that we're thinking about, of course, is as this stuff gets described, it's kind of like additional elements in the library catalog. And libraries, for a long, long time, have pooled those records to make access to what's in their library collections available to everyone else. What is the right course for us around that? And that's another element that we're continuing to look at and think about, so that there's a possibility here of making this stuff available to everyone else. In a Coursera world, as you have somebody who's putting together a course, you might want to know that somebody else has already done a video on that, so they can, you know, being published under Creative Commons, they might want to be able to find it. So, I think as Jim and I have talked about how to close this, what we have to say to you is watch this space. We want very, very much to bring this kind of service to market. As the two of us have worked on it, I think we've gotten more and more dedicated to trying to make that do it. We had hoped we could stand up here today, you know, when we thought about this back in February, we wanted to stand up and tell you that it was, you know, a go-to-market service. We're not there yet, but we don't think we're tremendously far away. So we hope that you will, you know, keep an eye on what we're doing and make sure that if you're interested, let us know so we can kind of keep posting it.
We still have a few minutes, so if you have any questions.
Regarding, you're doing closed captioning, you're doing the transcripts, so forth and so on. Are you making them compliant with the ADA requirements?
We have asked our pilot partners about that, and uniformly what they said was that what we had done was good enough for them. So that the way in which the transcripts being shown, the kind of capabilities around it seemed to be sufficient. You know,
Do you have a cost idea yet, maybe of the transcription cost per minute or metadata fees? I'm curious.
honestly, we don't yet. If we knew, you know, if we had completely settled on transcripts, we'd have an answer for you. But what we've seen with metadata, as Jim said, is that triangulating multiple methods for metadata has given us good results. We don't know yet if we have to triangulate multiple methods for transcription to get results. We just don't know yet. But I can tell you that affordability is at the top of our list. That's why we're continuing to pursue programmatic results. I mean, we want you to be able to give us gobs of this stuff because we think when you have a way of making it available, you'll want to.
Let's take a question too from the mic. Sure.
Hi, so I guess you're looking at the technical
right to kind of put it together. Right out of the box, that's not what we're thinking about. We're thinking about tapping into the campus as public. Because it's an unknown, it's an unserved area. It's the kind of thing we think we really want and that really meets scholarship needs. And boy, as you hear people talk about Coursera, for me, the whole need just kind of, goes way up. Now, will there be a time? Who knows? But not an issue.
One other question about the content that you're digitizing and making it discoverable. And this is content from individual institutions, and am I surmising that it's public domain content or content that can be shared? And will this be shared with the entire country?
I think that would be up to the institution, Jane.
Only to the institution?
It would be up to them. They're going to have the rights to say, they'll have the buttons to say who can see it, who can't see it.
Okay, so it may be in this huge database that they will just click and open to the world.
Right,
Or
there.
it may be only to their institution.
Correct.
So that, okay, that
Yep.
clarifies a lot.
So,
Okay.
so that, if it's something that you wanted to share with everybody, great, click that button. If it's, there were cases where, we may, somebody felt that they may not even be allowed to show the transcript. So, okay, keep that hidden then.
But they might be willing to share the metadata, but not the we have a lot of experience with this, though, because as a dissertation publisher, we get dissertations to which we have a variety of rights to. Sometimes we get a dissertation and all we can do is drop it in our big dissertations index, and other times we can put in full text. So we're going to use our usual methods of sorting it out.
Actually, I have questions. Seeing the examples from things that did not work well, are institutions doing any vetting, or they just say, here's what we got, you figure it out?
We asked the pilot partners to not vet. We asked the pilot partners to gather it up and send it over and to give us what they thought might be problematic as well as stuff that might be more straightforward. Which is why we've got, a can with chunks of 8mm film in it, some of it's got taped together. You got a call about that one from that version.
ASU as a partner chose to pull representative content from the big areas of content that we have. We have a lot of this, we have a lot of this. Let's pull examples of that. But we also tried to bring as many different formats to the table as we could, including deliberately trying to choose some things that would cause hair pulling.
So I'll give you one good example. One of the things we tested was there were a couple of cases where people sent us a digital file that they had made, but then they also sent us the 16mm to be converted. And let's just say that the professional digitization company made a better copy than, so you actually got a better transcript out of the things that were sent off for digitization than from the digital file that was sent originally. So it was interesting to see. As the most broad categories. Thank you, Matt.